Hello and welcome to the latest edition of News for English Learners. As usual, I'm going to be reading you an article from the news in English, and I'll be going over some of the more interesting words and vocabulary to help you to understand it and thereby increase your English vocabulary. So these videos are really aimed for people with an intermediate to advanced level of English, people who know the basics of English but really need to expand their vocabulary to gain more flexibility and fluency. If that sounds like you, then this could be really up your street. So, this week's article is about South Korean scientists and how they have come up with a possible solution to help with two really big problems in the world. Number one is world hunger, and number two is climate change. So, let's read about it. The first paragraph. In a world where working out a solution to the climate crisis is getting increasingly urgent, South Korean scientists have rolled up their sleeves and created something that could be a game changer. They have developed a new type of sustainable hybrid food, a meaty rice. This innovative grain, grown in a lab at Seoul's Yonsei University, is packed to the brim with beef muscle and fat cells. The team has managed to culture cow muscle and fat cells in rice grains, creating a hybrid food that could help us fend off food crises and climate change. The resulting pink rice could offer a cheaper and more environmentally sustainable meat alternative. So let's have a look at the first phrase we have up here. This is a phrasal verb. It's a separable phrasal verb, so that means you can put the noun between the verb and the particle. You can work something out. However, like many phrasal verbs and indeed normal verbs, it does have more than one meaning, which complicates the understanding a little bit. Probably you've come across this if you've ever been to a gym, if you've ever done any kind of physical activity, you've probably heard somebody say to work out. If you go to the gym, you work out, you do physical activity, you exercise. You can even use it as a noun. You can do a workout. However, it does have other uses, and it is a very versatile and useful word, which I definitely encourage you to learn. It can mean, for example, to calculate or to solve. It can mean to develop successfully, to reach a successful conclusion, to understand or to figure out, or to plan or to devise a plan. Just to give you some examples of that, how you would use it. Well, if you were perhaps planning the budget of a project, you might say that you need to work out the total cost in order to calculate the budget. In other words, to do a mathematical calculation. You could also perhaps talk about a plan developing successfully. You might say that after some initial problems, the project finally worked out. So everything went smoothly in the end. You may also hear people say that they can't work out what's happening. Maybe I have a problem with my computer and I just can't work out what's gone wrong. I don't know why there's a problem. And perhaps you need to work out a schedule that suits everybody in order to have a meeting. So you need to contact everybody and calculate when they're free in order to arrange that meeting. So you can see we use it in a variety of ways. In this particular context, what we're doing is talking about uh, finding a solution to the problem of climate change and how urgent that is. So let's move on to the next phrase here. This is to roll up your sleeves. So like a lot of idioms, it can seem a little mysterious at first glance, but if you actually understand the words that make up the phrase, it can help you to work out the true meaning. So let's start with sleeves. What are sleeves? Well, they are in fact part of clothing. if we think about a t-shirt has short sleeves. There is, however, another kind of t-shirt called a long-sleeved t-shirt, which has, of course, long sleeves. So we can see the sleeves are the part of the clothing that covers the arms, usually running from the shoulder to the wrist. Now, if we come to the verb part, to roll up your sleeves, well, to roll up is basically to fold the material in such a way that you change a long sleeve into a short sleeve. People do this for a few different reasons. Perhaps the weather has suddenly got warmer and you perhaps roll up your sleeves in order to cool down a little bit. You might also do this if you are preparing to do some physical labor, particularly if it's going to be messy and you don't want to get your clothes or your sleeves dirty. And that really is the key to understanding the meaning of this idiomatic phrase, because if somebody rolls up their sleeves metaphorically, then they are preparing to do some hard work. So what we're saying here is that the scientists have worked hard in order to create or to come up with something that could be important. It could be a game changer. Now, that's a word that I've covered in another one of my videos. And don't forget, if there are any words that you come across that I haven't covered in this video, they might be covered in some of the other videos. If you look in the video description, you'll find a complete list of all the words and phrases that I have explained and the video in which you can find them. So if you want, don't forget to check that out. So let's move on to the next word. Now, hybrid can be used both as a noun and as an adjective. It basically refers to using two different elements and combining those to create something new, to create something novel. Now, this could be an animal. For example, if you cross a donkey and a horse, if a donkey and a horse breed together, then the offspring is known as a mule in English. This is a different animal that is, it's not the same as either a horse or a donkey. It's something new. We also use hybrids in botany. If you cross one plant with another, you can create something novel or a new plant with new characteristics. In the world of technology, there are things which are referred to as hybrid. For example, hybrid vehicles use both electricity and fuel such as petrol. They combine those together in one vehicle. And in this case, we're talking about hybrid food. So again, it's taking two different elements. On the one hand, the scientists took the rice and they added something completely different, cells from the cow. And they created this hybrid food, this meaty rice. So moving on to the next phrase we have, it's packed to the brim. Now, in order to understand this phrase, we really need to understand two elements. Let's start with the noun, the brim. Now, the brim is actually quite similar to the edge, if you know that word. When we talk about something is, for example, a cup or a glass is full to the brim, that means that the glass or the cup is totally full, right up to the edge of the glass. The liquid is almost coming out. If we talk about somebody brimming with confidence, that means they are totally full of confidence. On the other hand, if we look at the verb to pack, in this case it's used as an adjective, but it is a verb. To pack is used when we talk about putting your clothes in your suitcase, preparing for going on holiday. If you pack your bags, you carefully fold all of your clothes and put them in the bag. We can also see this word used as a noun when we talk about a package. You wrap something up in order to send it by mail. So if we combine those two ideas together, what we are saying here is that this new rice, this new hybrid rice, is packed. So it's full, totally full with beef muscle and fat cells. So moving on to the next word we have in this article, this is the word culture. This can be used both as a noun and as a verb. As a noun, it generally refers to the broad range of human phenomenon that can define or can be used to define a group of people. So we're talking about language, history, art, customs, traditions, those kinds of things. So if we talk about Spanish culture, we may refer to the particular cuisine that people like to eat in Spain, or the particular habits that they adopt, or the music they produce, or the literature. That would be part of their culture. However, in this case, we can see here, because it's used as an infinitive, that we're using it as a verb, and this is quite different. This usually is used in the context of science. To culture essentially means to cultivate microorganisms or cells or tissues in a controlled environment. So, in this case, the scientific team has managed to cultivate the cow muscle and fat cells actually inside the rice grains and thereby create a hybrid food. So let's move on to the next word. So this word is another phrasal verb. To fend off can be separable. So to fend something off. You may be familiar with the verb to defend yourself. The noun is defense. This is essentially very similar, and you can see the similarity. No, defend, fend off. Both of those verbs are used when you are taking action to defend yourself against an attack or to ward off something that is undesirable. For example, if somebody attacks you, maybe a robber tries to rob you in the street, you may fend off your attacker. You may defend yourself physically by using physical force. If you are out walking in nature and there's a lot of mosquitoes or other irritating insects, you may try to fend them off by using some kind of insect repellent. In this case, we are talking metaphorically, so we're not talking about physical action here, but we are talking about using this new hybrid food to help us to prevent food crises and climate change. So we are kind of defending ourselves from those possible problems. If we move on to the last phrase, we have this combination of adverb and adjective, environmentally sustainable. When we talk about sustainability, it's often in the context of the environment. And this is something that is very fashionable and it's very common to hear because of the problems that we have with the environment. Essentially, our economy relies on non renewable energy sources such as oil and gas. And the problem with these is twofold. One of them is that they will eventually run out, they're non renewable. But also, the second problem is they create a lot of pollution and environmental problems. They're non sustainable. We cannot keep consuming them indefinitely. So, if something is environmentally sustainable, it essentially means that it is renewable and it is possible to use it or without creating environmental degradation or damage. So that is the hope that this pink rice, this meaty rice, could help to minimize the impact of the meat industry because it's more sustainable. The meat industry isn't sustainable essentially because of the problems with pollution that it creates and the consumption of energy. So let's move on to the next paragraph. The process of creating this hybrid food involves first coating the grains in fish gelatin to help the beef cells latch on. Then they are left to grow in a petri dish for up to 11 days. The final product is a bit tougher than regular rice, but it packs a punch with 8% more protein and 7% more fat. But the icing on the cake is the significantly smaller carbon footprint. For every 100 grams of protein produced, hybrid rice is estimated to release under 6.27 kilograms of carbon dioxide. In comparison, beef production releases 8 times more. The team is now keen to develop the process before the rice hits the market. They believe that this grain-based hybrid food could one day serve as food relief for famine, military rations, or even space food. So, turning to the first word in this paragraph, we have the word coat. This can be used as a regular verb and as a noun. As a noun, we commonly see this when we refer to an item of clothing that is usually worn outside when it's cold in the autumn and the winter. It's a thick garment that keeps us warm in the cold weather. As a verb, to coat something essentially means to cover it. If we think about painting a house, when you paint a wall in your house, usually you have to apply several coats of paint. So it's very similar in meaning to layer. And when you coat something, you apply a layer to an object. In this case, the scientists actually applied a layer of fish gelatin to the grains of rice in order to help the cells from the cows latch onto them. So they coated the grains in fish gelatin. So that brings us on to the next phrasal verb, which is to latch on. Let's first start with looking at the noun form of this. A latch is essentially a mechanical device that we often find on gates or doors, and it's used to keep the door closed without locking it. So you can open it easily without a key, and when the door swings shut, the latch holds the door in position or attaches it. And that essentially gives us the meaning of the phrasal verb, because to latch on means to attach or to stick to. So in this case, the gelatin that's coating the grains of rice is helping the beef cells to attach to the grains of rice themselves. Other uses of latch on could be, for example, certain animals like leeches. In order to suck the blood out of an animal, they have to latch on to that animal and suck the blood. There are certain sea creatures as well that latch on to the rocks, things like barnacles that you often find covering ships or boats or animals. They latch on to the animal, or they latch on to the rocks or the ship. So anything that attaches to something else can latch on. And of course, it can be used metaphorically. You can latch on to an idea or a belief if you become attached to that emotionally or intellectually. So that brings us on to the next phrase, to pack a punch. This is an idiomatic expression, which essentially means to have a powerful effect or impact. And it can refer to physical impact, or it could also be an emotional impact or force. If we talk about a punch, well, this is something that people do when they are fighting. Boxers, for example, use their fists to punch each other. And obviously, from that metaphor of hitting to having a powerful impact, we get this idiomatic meaning. So, to give you an example, if you are talking about flavor of something, perhaps you taste a chili pepper and you say that this chili pepper really packs a punch, you're saying that it has a very powerful flavor. Maybe it's very spicy. Perhaps you're talking about a movie and the end of the movie is very sad, and you could say that it really packs a punch. It affected you in a powerful way, but emotionally rather than physically. So we can see that in this case, the rice packs a punch because it has a lot of protein and a lot of fat. Well, a lot more than normal rice would have. So it is powerful in that sense, nutritionally. So let's move on to the next phrase. So the next phrase we have is this idiomatic phrase, the icing on the cake. This is a fairly common idiom, and like most of them, it is not used literally. However, if we understand the literal meaning, it may help us get an idea of the metaphorical meaning. So if you've ever made a cake, you might have applied icing. Icing is a substance made out of sugar and water principally, and you apply it after you've baked the cake. And it's basically used for decoration and for enhancing the flavor. So, what we're talking about with the idiom is in a similar way, we're referring to something that enhances an already positive situation or adds finishing touches to something that is already quite good. Now, let me warn you because you will sometimes hear this used in a negative context. And in that sense, it's used usually sarcastically. So imagine I said, I was already late for work and then I got stuck in the traffic, and that was the icing on the cake. So obviously, I am saying in this case that added an extra layer of inconvenience to my already bad situation. However, most of the time when you hear it, it will be used in a positive context. So you could say, for example, that winning the match was great, but the fan support or the cheering of the fans was the icing on the cake. It made that good experience, that positive experience, even better. Now, in this case, in the article, the icing on the cake, the extra positive thing, if you like, is that the beefy rice has a significantly smaller carbon footprint. So it has a smaller environmental impact. So that brings us on to the next word. So this word is a noun. A footprint can be an physical impression that you make when you walk on certain surfaces. For example, if you walk in the snow, usually your weight will make you sink down and you'll see an impression of your shoes in the snow. Those are your footprints. Equally, you can see a similar effect if you walk on wet sand or soft earth, which is commonly called mud. In all of these cases, you can see footprints, and people use the footprints of animals, for example, to track them when they're hunting. We also can talk about fingerprints. When you pick something up, sometimes you leave an impression of your fingers, the patterns on your fingers, on that object. However, in this case, we're not talking about a physical impression. We are using the same word to refer to an impact, but it's an environmental impact. So when we talk about the carbon footprint, we are really referring to the total amount of greenhouse gases that are produced directly or indirectly in order to do something, some kind of human activity. And it's usually expressed in tons of carbon dioxide or CO2. Now, what the article is saying here is that this new hybrid way of producing meaty rice has a smaller environmental impact. So it has a smaller carbon footprint than the traditional ways of raising cows for meat. So in that way, it is seen as beneficial. So moving on to the last word. So this final word, keen, is an adjective, and it can be used in a couple of different ways. First of all, it can be used to talk about some kind of highly developed or perceptive sense. For example, if you have keen eyesight, that means that you can spot the smallest details from a great distance. Some animals, like dogs, have a very keen sense of smell. They can detect scents that humans cannot detect. So it's much more developed and powerful. However, we most commonly use this adjective when we're talking about being eager or enthusiastic about something. So it is more or less a synonym of to be eager. And to give you a few examples, we could say that I am very keen to go on holiday. That means that I desire greatly to have a vacation. I could be very keen to practice my English. That means I have a desire to improve my language by practicing it with somebody. You could be a keen footballer, so you're very enthusiastic about playing football or some other sport. And in this case, the scientific team behind this development is very eager, very enthusiastic about it, and they really want to develop it more before they can commercialize it. So they are in a hurry to do that, and they're very motivated to do it. That's what being keen really means. So I hope you've enjoyed today's article. I hope you've learned something. And if you have, don't forget to like this video. And if you want to stay informed about future videos, of course, subscribe. And of course, don't forget to check out the many other videos that I have on my channel. In any case, I thank you very much for watching till the end, and I'll see you next time on English Vocabulary Matters.